Hello and welcome to the Legislative Report. I'm Representative Sue Helm of the 104th Legislative District in Dauphin County. Recently, I hosted an elected officials and community leaders breakfast for commissioners, borough council members, supervisors, and school board members in my district. Our keynote speaker was Congressman Lou Barletta. Congressman Barletta recently became our representative in Congress after the redistricting that was enacted last year. I think you will enjoy listening to his views on Washington, the country as it is today, and our home state of Pennsylvania. Enjoy. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're going to get started. Congressman Barletta is here. Thank you for coming. We're thrilled that you're here in the 104th District. We're going to start with a prayer. Gary Myers, if you would come up and offer the prayer.
I got you ready. Bow your heads, please. Lord, thank you for the people in this room today. Thank you for all their public service. Thank you for the people they serve. May you continue to guide us. May you continue to always be out in front. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. If everybody would stand, we'll do the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to start with some prepared remarks, and then when I'm finished, then Congressman Barletta is going to come up. But I'd just like to thank everyone for coming to my first elected officials and community leaders breakfast. Someone suggested this, and we thought we'd give it a try, and nice to see a group of people here. I also want to thank the Giant for what they've done for us. We've really had a hard time finding a place for a long time to have events like this. And it wasn't that we didn't have the halls, we didn't have the parking. Like I had a senior expo one time over at Progress Firehouse, and even though they were wonderful to us, all the vendors parked in the parking lot, and when the seniors came who had to be close, there wasn't any place to park for them. So this works out really, really well for us. But I also want to thank our speaker again, Congressman Lou Barletta, for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be with us this morning. Like I know you'll all be glad to hear from him, and believe me, I know how busy he is, and we'll be so glad to hear what's happening in Washington. Of course, the big news is that we adopted a state budget at the end of June that was on time and does not raise taxes. And we did it for the second year in a row. We have proven again that Pennsylvania can indeed live within its financial means, just as most households and businesses have had to do during these difficult economic times. I think everybody here can relate to that. I'm sure everyone here 10 years ago had more money in your pocket than you do now. But the budget spends $27.7 billion, which is 1.45% less than last year, but still below the rate of inflation. And as stated, it was the second year in a row that we passed it on time. It was around 11:45 on the 30th when we did pass the budget. This year I didn't get to go down for the signing because I had a bill that was waiting to come up, and I was actually afraid to walk down. I was afraid I would go down there and they'll bring my bill up. And part of my bill was to do another land transfer, which actually went to Susquehanna Township, but it benefited PSECU, and Greg Smith is here, and he was nice enough to bring me this picture of how far PSECU is along, and that's always interesting and exciting to me to see that, since I did 4 pieces of legislation now, and appreciate the fact that they trusted me to do that for them. But my bill also did the transfer of the Scotland School, because several years ago Governor Rendell decided not to fund Scotland School anymore, and we've been paying over $1.7 million a year just to keep it up running, to do nothing, to sit there. So now it's been transferred to Weinbrenner Seminary, and the town's very happy to have someone like that seminary there in Scotland. But restoring the governor's proposed cuts to education was the top priority, and I'm pleased to report that that did happen. We were able to fund the 4 state-related universities, including Penn State, and the 14 state-owned schools, including Shippensburg and Millersville, at the same level as last year. And I'm also pleased to tell you that we were able to include an additional $100 million for our public schools through the full restoration of the Accountability Block Grant Program, which gives school districts the flexibility to fund important initiatives such as all-day kindergarten. And as a result, every school district in the 104th Legislative District will see an increase in its state appropriations. Human Services was the other big cut this year. The governor proposed 20% cut, and we ended up with only 10%. And that, it was absolutely unreal, the number of people that I had come to me to talk to me about mental health and mental retardation and how we had to fund that. I mean, I got to the point where I said, like, if I'm seeing so many people, I don't even have time to work on this project. But I did see everyone, and like sometimes we had 3 different groups a day in our offices to try and get mental health and mental retardation funding restored. But I believe the state budget is a sustainable plan based on reliable and recurring revenue sources, which continues the process of returning Pennsylvania to firmer financial grounds by living within our means. In other business, we have taken a first step towards reducing the size and cost of the General Assembly. I joined a majority of House members in passing historic legislation that would shrink the size of the House and Senate by 25%. House Bill 153 would amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to restore the size of the House from 203 to 153 members. The Senate would be reduced from 50 to 38 members. However, this process, it's a lengthy one, a very lengthy one. It must pass in 2 consecutive sessions of the General Assembly and also be approved by Pennsylvania voters. And I really think that most Pennsylvania voters would vote for it if it ever does come up for a vote. If the legislation stays on its current track, the reductions would take place in the first session of the General Assembly that begins after the 2020 census and subsequent legislative reapportionment. So you know that's a little way off, but Pennsylvania has the largest legislature in the country and one of the most expensive to operate. Just as many families and businesses across the Commonwealth have done, I believe we need to learn how to live within our means in Harrisburg. House Bill 153 is now under consideration in the Senate, so if you're interested in this passage, contact our senator. The House is also considering several proposals to change the way our public schools are funded. Property tax reform is the top priority for many constituents in the 104th District, especially for older residents on fixed incomes who are having a hard time paying their tax bill. We see this all the time. This is Deb Schwartz, who works in the district office, and Adam Krasinski. They're getting more and more and more calls daily on this problem of property taxes. People just can't afford to pay them. The one bill would reduce or eliminate property taxes and replace them with increased personal income or sales taxes. And just this last week, a special committee on property tax reform met for the first time. The committee is charged with examining all the proposals that are out there and to present its findings and recommendations to the House by November 30th. Like for the last 2 years, I was on a property tax task force, and we came up with 4 different bills. And the last thing we did in our last meeting that we had was to say, hey, like we're not going to, one person has this bill like they wanted to pass, but let's not just give one representative the glory of it. Let's look at these 4 bills and maybe even some other means of changing this and combine one good bill. So now this new committee, that's what they're tasked to do, is to look at all these bills that we have out and combine one and find an answer for property tax elimination or at least somewhat reduction. And finally, we have a new law in place that will prevent voter fraud in Pennsylvania by requiring all voters to show photo identification before casting their ballot, including this fall's general election. The voter ID law has come under a lot of fire recently, but earlier this month, a Commonwealth Court judge upheld the law about a court challenge that was filed by opponents. This bill and law, like a lot of people have talked to me about it, and at first, when they don't understand it thoroughly, they're against it. And when I explain to them how easy it's going to be, they're okay with it. Like a lot of nursing homes, people have called me like, what am I going to do? Like I have to do absentee ballot. That is very, very easy. On the absentee ballot, you put your last 4 digits of your social security number and you're going to be fine. So if you know anybody in nursing homes, assure them. Like I've been going around to the different homes and talking to the people, and actually on the 12th, we're taking a bus down to PennDOT for anybody that wants to get on this bus and go down there and get their voter ID. At this point, I think we have talked long enough, and it's now time to hear from our guest speaker, who will be happy to answer your questions at the conclusion of his remarks. And I'll also be available. What I'm going to do is let Lou Barletta talk, ask the questions, and then if you have any state-related questions, I'll do it at the very end because I know a lot of you will have to get to work. Congressman Lou Barletta proudly represents his hometown of Hazleton and the people of the 11th Congressional District, which will include part of Dauphin County starting in January. Congressman Barletta was sworn into office in January 2011 after serving as Hazleton's mayor for 10 years. Despite inheriting a massive budget shortfall, he was able to turn things around in his hometown with tough, fiscally responsible decisions. In addition, his leadership on the issue of illegal immigration in Hazleton garnered national attention. I think we all have known you for that, and thank you for doing it. Congressman Barletta was the first mayor in the country to introduce and sign into law local ordinance cracking down on businesses that knowingly hire illegal aliens. Congressman Barletta serves on these House committees, Education and Workforce, Transportation and Infrastructure, and the Committee on Small Business. And I thought, wow, there are 3 great committees, so we appreciate what you've been doing for us and what you would continue to do for us. Finally, the Congressman and his wife, Mary Grace, are the parents of 4 daughters, and they have 1 grandchild. It's now my pleasure to introduce Congressman Lou Barletta.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you for inviting me. I know how hard Sue works at serving her constituents, and it's a real credit to the folks here to have her working on your behalf. I have to make one correction to what Sue said. That was an old bio that you used. I now have 2 grandchildren. My daughter had a little baby girl last week. So, it's amazing because Gabriel Lewis, who is my grandson, he's 3 years old, he gets credit for me being in Congress. I don't know if many of you knew, I ran for Congress 3 times. But after the second time in 2008, it was a very, very hard-fought election. I was running against a 26-year incumbent in a district that was 2-1 Democrat. So things were not looking favorably for me, but we came so very close to winning that election. And it was so hard fought, I said, 2 times is enough. It's very hard on your family. I have 4 daughters. I'm just going to go back and be mayor and be happy with that. But something happened that changed my life. I became a grandfather to Gabriel Lewis. And he was the motivation for me running for the 3rd time, because I truly was concerned about what type of America Gabriel would grow up in, whether or not he would have the same opportunities that I had, that my father and mother worked for, and my grandparents, and I knew that I would have an opportunity because of how close I came to going to Washington and hopefully making a better future for that generation. So I'm remotivated now that I have a granddaughter to go to Washington and fight for. I have to tell you a little bit about my background before I tell you about what's happening and not happening in Washington. I never, ever dreamt that I would be involved in public service as an elected official. I did not like politics growing up. I wanted to play center field for the New York Yankees. I was convinced that's what I was going to do. But I was studying, my family was in the road construction business. They were building highways and bridges, and they had stone quarries. So I grew up on a quarry, working in construction. Decided to go to school. Thought maybe baseball was not going to actually happen. The Yankees had a couple good center fielders. So I went to school to study elementary education. I was going to be a school teacher, and it was there when I was at Bloomsburg. It was State College at the time. I had a chance to try out with the Cincinnati Reds, and that was really my dream. And I was married. I married Mary Grace while we were in college, and I decided that this is what I was going to do. And I went to my father and told him I wanted to leave school and pursue a baseball career. And I was scared. My father was an old-time Italian, real very big guy, and I was amazing. The lesson he taught me, he said, don't be afraid. If it's something you want to do, go ahead and do it. And I told him, tell mom that, because I don't think she's going to take the same attitude. But I left school, went to play baseball. The Reds found out I couldn't hit a curveball, and they sent me home. Went to work for my family's construction business, and didn't know whether or not I should go back and finish my last year of college. I was starting a family at the time. We had 2 girls, 2 of our 4. And I got a card in the mail for $29.95 you can paint your own parking lot. So I got this bright idea, $30, I can afford that, why don't I start a business? And I went home and told my wife, I said, I got an idea. I said, I'm going to leave my father's construction business, and you and I are going to start a line painting business, which I knew nothing about. And but I knew I had $30. So she said, you're crazy. And I said, I know. So I went, I had to tell my father now, again, that I'm leaving the construction business. I had 2 little kids. You know, I knew nothing about business. And again, he reminded me, you know, that lesson. He said, don't be afraid, you know, go ahead and do it if that's what you want. And I reminded what I asked him to do, please go home and tell Mom that I'm going to be leaving and starting out on my own. Well, for $29.95, you get a case of aerosol cans and a little push machine. But within 5 years, we grew that little business into the largest in the state of Pennsylvania. And when I sold the business, when I became mayor of Hazleton, it was the 6th largest of its kind in the country. And it was during that time that I really started paying attention to politics and government, and how government was interfering with small business, with how these regulations were making it harder. And I also started paying attention to local politics, because in Hazleton at the time, the mayor and council were fighting all the time. The headlines in the paper were always very entertaining, but I didn't think they were very good for business. People were leaving, businesses were leaving, and I said, this is not a good environment for business. It's not a good environment for my family. You know, I'm going to get involved. And I decided to run for city council. And once I got on council, I realized I disliked politicians even more than I thought I did. Once I saw how they were mismanaging city government, and I realized that I had to become mayor to do the things that I wanted to do in Hazleton. Now, Hazleton is very political. It's 2-1 Democrat, and I was a Republican, and the political bosses told me, not going to work. You know, you've got to switch your registration if you want to be mayor here, and I wouldn't do it. And I ran, and I won by a 2-1 margin. When I ran for re-election for the second term, I won by a 4-1 margin. And when I ran for my third term as mayor, I won with over 90% of the vote in the city, which only goes to show, and I talk about this in D.C., that if you're willing to stand up for what you believe in and fight for your constituents and the people back home, it doesn't matter what party you're in. Democrats, Republicans, Independents, that's what they're looking for, somebody who will stand up and do the right thing, not what's always politically correct, but what's right for the people you represent. Now, Hazleton was in real bad shape. We had a $1.2 million budget deficit, and we only had a $6 million budget. There were illegal contracts with all the labor unions. They were illegal because the mayor had negotiated contracts and implemented them without them being ratified by city council. So there was no checks and balances. He simply gave the employees what he wanted, and away he went. So the first day I was sworn into office, I took the oath of office. I went in the mayor's office. I called all the labor unions and told them that I couldn't honor their contracts. They were illegal. And I set a record for grievances filed against a mayor in one day. But, you know, we sat down, and it was really there where I learned the art of compromise, something that is lost in Washington. As we sat down with the labor unions, I explained to them that we have two choices here. You know, we could continue this and go Act 47, where the state will come in and really take over here, or we could sit down and negotiate. And if we can build this city back up again, your job will be safer. And to the credit of the unions, we did. We reworked the contracts. We had them signed and ratified by council, so there was checks and balances. I had fired all of the management because they were all, again, friends and families of mayors, and that's the way things were done in Hazleton. I advertised in a newspaper. We took resumes. We did interviews, and I hired the most qualified people that I could. And I had told all the management administration that they had to take a 5% pay cut because we had put a freeze on wages, and that I, as mayor, would take a 10% pay cut, and we would change the way we're doing business in Hazleton. We would send a clear message that we're going to run this like a business. And in 2 years, we wiped out that $1.2 million deficit and had a $500,000 surplus. and the cities, we start seeing businesses come back into the city, and things were going pretty well. And this is where you may have heard of me a little bit. We started having a problem with illegal immigration. Our population grew by 50%, but our tax revenue remained the same. We started seeing many violent crimes, and they were committed many times by people who were in the country illegally. We started seeing some gangs moving into the community, and quality of life was really being destroyed in Hazleton. I didn't know what to do because we had a small budget. Went to Washington, met with the Department of Justice, told them about the problems I had, needed help, and what I got at the end of the day was this nice coffee mug. I got a lapel pin, and they sent me back home. A couple months later, 29-year-old man, Derek Kishline, he was the father of 3 little children, was working on his pickup truck when head of the Latin Kings had walked by him. Derek had some words about what he didn't want him to do around his children. Pedro Cabrera, who was in the country illegally, went to his car, got a gun, and shot Mr. Kishline, killing him. We spent half of our yearly budget in overtime in the police department on that one homicide until we caught Cabrera and his accomplice. They were both in the country illegally, and Cabrera was arrested 8 times before he came to Hazleton and took the life of Derek Kishline. He shouldn't have even been in the country. And I realized that I had to do something to protect my town. And it's important because many times people never hear the whole story of how this came. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to pick on illegal immigrants because I want to get on Lou Dobbs. I did it because it was a problem affecting my city, and it didn't matter what the problem was. It didn't matter what the problem was, whether it was illegal immigration, whatever the problem was, I was going to stand up and fight for the people there. And that's important for everyone to know, because we need to do that more in Washington. We need to start fighting for the people that send us to Washington and stop worrying about our next elections and start worrying about the direction this country is going in. And that's what's very frustrating for me, because I took my life's experience as a mayor, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who realizes that people count on you when they elect you. And I took that to Washington to see such gridlock and such lack of common sense that it is very frustrating for me, who is still a freshman, when I see that, I fought so hard to protect our small budget and to try to keep the city in the black, to realize that we borrow in Washington $188 million every hour of every day. We borrow $4 billion a day. Now, when my little granddaughter was born last week, I couldn't help to look at her and tell my daughter, I said, little Maddie owes $45,500 to the federal government towards the debt. On her first day on this earth, she owes $45,500. What kind of opportunity are we leaving this generation if we cannot get our finances, the country's finances, in control? And I could tell you, as an entrepreneur, I would not start my new business today because Washington has created so much uncertainty. As a small businessman, you just need to know what the rules are going to be. We don't know. We don't know what the taxes are going to be next year. I mean, as a business person, how can you plan? This economy is not going to pick up. It's not going to get better until we get rid of the uncertainty. We don't know what regulations are going to come down on business. And when you have uncertainty, whether it be over-regulation or whether it be taxes or whether or not we know what the health care law is going to be and how this will impact our businesses, businesses aren't going to hire people. They're not going to expand. You're not going to get entrepreneurs. I walked into a bank back in 1985 and walked out with a little line of credit. You can't do that today. So we've got a lot of work to do. And we've got to start using common sense and not worrying about elections and whether or not politically how this looks, and just have the courage to stand up, the courage of your convictions to stand up for what you believe in. And again, like I said, it's been very frustrating for me because I went there to get something done. I didn't need another job. I was the mayor in my hometown. I lived 5 minutes from my house. I got to see my wife and children and grandchildren every day. I went to Washington to get something done. And I hope that, my hope is that, that we will be able to. There were 87 new freshmen that went there because the American people are fed up. They're fed up with the fact that Washington wasn't listening. And we need to do more of that. The committees that I'm on, and Sue pointed out, they're committees that fit me well. I'm on a small business committee. I enjoy that because I was a small businessman. Being on transportation and infrastructure is very important to me because I grew up in a family that built highways and roads. And I'm on the education committee because I feel, it's not that our children are failing. We are failing our children. No child left behind doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm part of reform in Washington, where we're going to take the Washington out of the classroom and allow teachers to become teachers again, and allow parents and school districts and states to allow their children to use innovative ideas to teach. My oldest daughter's a teacher, my youngest daughter's a teacher, my wife and I went to school to be a teacher. I hear a lot about how No Child Left Behind is handcuffing our teachers in the classroom because they're teaching the tests and not really using new ideas. So I'm excited to be on those committees, but when I sit there and two of the committee hearings that we had, one we had GSA. I don't know if you've followed what's happened with GSA, General Services. They're really the landlords for federal government. They go out and find buildings for federal offices. Well, they had the $800,000 conference in Las Vegas, and you may have saw the one director with the 2 martini glasses in the hot tub. And so they were before the committee, and here they went on another trip again. They were in Washington on a one-day conference that you paid for $250,000 for the one-day conference. They paid a consultant $105,000 to plan that one-day trip for them. And they gave out $20,000 worth of drumsticks for souvenirs for everyone to take home with them. Now, this is at a time when we're $15 trillion in debt. Our budget is 1.4, we have a $1.4 trillion deficit. They gave out $44 million in bonuses last year. So everybody was really, they were yelling at the people that were there. And so when it was my opportunity to talk, I had asked for their budget because I wanted to see what they had budgeted for travel, for conferences, for bonuses. And I knew the answer. The answer is that's not the way they budget. And see what they do in Washington, they just take last year's budget and they add or subtract what they want from last year's budget. So, what I said to them was, this really isn't your fault. This isn't your fault. This to me was like, if you are the parents of a teenager and you're going to go on vacation, but before you go on vacation, you go out and you fill the house up with liquor. And then you take your credit card and you throw the credit card on the table. And then you go on vacation. And then you come home and you find empty bottles all over the house and the credit card's maxed out. And the parents say, what the heck happened here? It's Congress's fault. We've allowed our government not to function the way you have to work in local government, not the way you have to function in your own household, in your own businesses. It's not the way they're doing business in Washington. If we had, and I talked about, if we had zero-based budgeting, and the way that works is every department would start with the same amount, zero. Not what last year's budget was. You start with zero, and you justify what you need for that year. You wouldn't have $44 million in bonuses budgeted. The federal government would not be in the mess we're in. We can't even pass a budget. The Senate hasn't voted for a budget in over 3 years. We voted for a balanced budget in the House, and I saw one member cheering as it was defeated. And I thought, how sad is this? Here's a country that's going over a fiscal cliff, and we are cheering because we couldn't pass a balanced budget. The American people have asked us to be responsible with their money. And that means making tough decisions. So if you're sensing a little frustration from me, it's just the shock of going to Washington and realizing that we do need to make tough decisions. And I am prepared to do that, whether it's politically correct or favorable for me or not. That's what Gabriel Lewis, my grandson, would want, and that's what my little granddaughter, who was just born last week, would expect of me to do that. So we're going to continue to work and try to get the American people back to work again. The idea for me is if more people we can get back to work, the more revenue we're going to get because we're going to have more taxpayers. So if we could get rid of some of the uncertainty, some of the over-regulations, and let people know what the rules are, I think this country will come back strong again because it's the greatest country on earth. There's not a better place that we could be in. So I'm very proud to be serving in Congress, and I look forward to working with everyone here. I could tell you I never take my mayor's hat off in Washington. I am a local government guy and a small businessman, and I try to use those experiences when I make my decisions in Washington. So with that, I'd like to maybe give everyone a chance. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Can you comment on the idea of drug testing welfare recipients, where you stand on that?
Yeah, actually, I believe it's a good idea, and there, to be honest with you, there seems to be some momentum. I'm hearing more and more of it in Washington, where many of my colleagues feel the same. That there's, when I talked about GSA, we're really zeroing in on waste, fraud, and abuse. And there is so much of it. If we can begin to cut out the waste, fraud, and abuse, I think that would be a good start to where we need to go. And again, drug testing folks who are on welfare would be a good start, again, to try to set a new direction. We all want to help people who need help, but on the other hand, there are many who are abusing the system, abusing the money that's being given to them. And that's an example. Another example of waste, I talked about GSA. We also had Amtrak in front of our committee. Last year, Amtrak lost $8 million in food and beverage sales. Now, I don't know, it's not like there's a lot of competition when you're on that train. I don't know if you can get off the train and jump on another train for something to eat or drink. It should be pretty easy not to lose money. You have a captive audience on that train. In the last 10 years, they've lost $84 million in food and beverage sales. And it's just amazing to me that they can go on and on and on year to year to year and not see something wrong here with what's going on. So we are really trying to zero in on waste, fraud, and abuse. And you're going to hear a lot about Medicare because it's an election year, and every election year usually the seniors are the political football that get kicked around. But the truth of the matter is we have, in trying to get America's finances straightened out, we have looked at what is the cause of this debt. Why is this debt spiraling out of control? And the truth of the matter is that we could cut out all of discretionary spending, everything, every penny we spend of discretionary spending, including all of the Department of Defense. We can zero out every one of those. We will not put a dent in America's debt. That's how serious it is. What's happening is it's the entitlements, and it's not anyone's fault. But fact of the matter is that 10,000 people are retiring every single day, and there are not enough people paying into it. So this debt is just going out of control. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. Medicare will be bankrupt in 2024, and Social Security will be bankrupt after that if we don't do anything. And the reason most elected officials in Washington haven't done anything, because who wants to come home and campaign that you're going to do something about Medicare? You know what happens. But the fact of the matter is that if we do not tackle those issues, if we do not have some type of reform, it won't be there for younger Americans. So when people say to me, you're going to end Medicare. No, I'm not. Medicare is going to end on its own. And if we don't do something. So we really do have to have reforms to Medicare. Now, the plan that we're working on, you need to understand it, because in a campaign, in an election year, you hear all kind of stuff. But the plan that we're working on is if you are 55 years or older, nothing will change. Because it's too hard for people who are already at that stage of their life to plan for something that they've been promised. So if you're 55 or older, you keep the plan that you have. But if you're younger than 55, Medicare won't be there for you. So our plan is to offer the same plan to the American people that I got as a member of Congress. When I was elected, they gave me a book with all kind of health care plans in it. I got to choose the plan that I wanted. However, depending on the plan that I chose, there was a cost to it. The federal government will subsidize so much of that plan, and then you will pay the difference. Because of the plan I chose, I pay $455 a month for my health care because I wanted the plan. I could have chosen something else. If we do the same thing with the American people, with people who are younger, we not only save Medicare, we begin to pay off America's debt. If you saw this on a graph, you would see gradually we would get America's debt under control, and we would finally be out of debt by the year 2070, I believe, or 2074. But we changed the direction of America's debt again. And that's important because nobody wants to, nobody wants to come back and try to have these discussions. But if we don't, I know what the consequences are going to be. So it's very important that we tackle the tough issues. You do it all the time, whether it be local government or at home. I think people in Washington should do the same.
Lou, is it true that with Social Security, all they really have to do is just raise the pay at the end? If you don't top out at $110,000, it's just the more you make, the more you just continue to pay. I've read somewhere that might control 90% of the cost.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of different ways that what they can do with, and that's one of the raises. They could, again, the payroll tax, they could take more money out. They could also raise gradually raise the retirement age, by a month, then by a couple months, by a year for younger people. And, so there's a couple of different ideas. Social Security will be much easier to fix than Medicare is, but it can be fixed, and I think that's why you're not hearing as much about Social Security, because I believe everyone agrees that it will probably be the easier of the two to fix, but Medicare is going to go bankrupt first. In 12 years, Medicare is done. So that's why there's so much focus on trying to solve Medicare. And I went home and I talked to my daughters about it. I said, what would you say if I told you, this is what we're going to do? Now, people who are 30, 32 years old. If you tell people and they have enough time to plan for it, then that's fine. I believe that the American people will accept that and the fact that we will save this program. But if we do nothing and say, well, I'm not going to take a chance I won't get elected, I'm not going to go home and tell, we have more seniors in the 11th Congressional District than anywhere else in Pennsylvania. I should be the last guy talking about it. But that's not what I went to Washington for. I went there to fix the problem. And if somebody's got a better idea, I'm willing to listen to it. But right now, this is the only idea on the table, and it seems to make sense.
I'd like to speak into the mic, because the only important is that people are going to listen to this in the future to be able to hear your question.
Thank you, Congressman. As an elected official, I go door to door in my ward, and I hear people say that they're lamenting the lack of compromise, especially in Washington. However, you just described a scenario where one of the congressmen applauded the failure of a balanced budget. I guess my question to you is, how do you compromise in an environment like that? How do you compromise with people like that? What's your approach?
Well, that's been probably the greatest reason for my frustration, and my staff unfortunately has to hear it all the time, because as a mayor, I couldn't get anything done if I didn't compromise. I would not have been able to solve the city's financial problems if I didn't sit down with the unions and say, listen, I know I'm not going to get everything I want, and there's got to be some give and take, but I'm a type of person that wants to continue to move the football down the field, even if it's only 5 yards and 10 yards at a time. At least let's have something. It's not that way in Washington. I'm going to tell you, there are people on both sides, whether they're very far left or whether they're very far right, who are in very safe districts, and this is one of the problems that I'm seeing, again, just my first impression in Washington, is that members who are, some members, I can't say all members, some members who are in very safe seats, they could just continually stand on principle and get nothing done, and get nothing done. And there's a group in the middle who realize that we have to, because one house is controlled by the Republicans, one house is controlled by the Democrats, and then there's a Democrat in, that if we don't compromise and find areas where there is common ground, I mean, you can't give up your principle, your total principles. I can't be for something I totally don't believe in. But on the other hand, I know there is areas where I could say, okay, it's not exactly what I want, but I'm getting something here that I think is positive for the people back home, and I'm willing to do that. There's not enough of that. And unfortunately, you get yelled at from both sides when you start talking like that. When you say, listen, I'm willing to sit down and work with people on the other side to get something accomplished, you get yelled at from people on the far right and people on the far left from that. And unfortunately, I'm very, very concerned about this. I'm very concerned that through redistricting across the country, that we're creating very safe seats for one side or the other. And when you have that, there's less of a need to compromise, and there's less of the folks in the middle. And I believe that's part of the problem. I really do, because we have some folks who will not budge at all. I worked on a highway bill that I was very, very excited about. It was a 5-year bill. I thought this will put America back to work. There's nothing better than a good infrastructure bill, because when there's a lot of construction work, those construction workers make good money, because when the sun's shining like today, they're going to work overtime, because they want to get as much work done. And when they make a lot of money, you know what they do? They take their families out to eat, they fix things, they spend that money right back in the local economy, all the suppliers to the materials. There's a real effect on the economy here in America when we're doing a lot of infrastructure. And I just didn't think there was enough compromise. I thought we could have got that bill passed. It was a 5-year bill, and there were such great reforms in it. Right now, it takes 15 years for a project to be, from the time it's first planned until it's completed, it takes 15 years. We had, through streamlining the whole process, the permitting, we had cut it down to 7 years from 15. There were 103 different programs. We were able to cut out 70 duplicative programs. There were some real good ideas. We were going to fund our infrastructure through taking royalties from oil and gas drilling on federal land, take those royalties and put it in fixing America's infrastructure instead of sending $1 billion a day to countries that hate us. How about producing American energy and keeping that money here in America, and then taking money and using it to fix America's infrastructure? I was so excited about this. It was a 5-year bill, and we said, well, we don't have the votes to get it passed. We're going to have to pass a 2-year bill. And I stood up. I was very vocal about it. I said, I'm sorry. I told the speaker that. I said, I'm very sorry, but this is the wrong thing for America. I came from a family that was in construction. They will not hire more people if we pass a 2-year bill. That's not the way this industry works. They need to know there's work for at least 5 years before they're going to buy new equipment, before they're going to hire new workers. 2 years is not enough time. Pennsylvania has 5,000 structurally deficient bridges. 5,000. Ohio has 4,000 structurally deficient bridges. They're not going to get better. They're going to get worse. And some of these bridges may have to be closed down before we get the money to repair them. And we were not able to get the votes to be able to get that bill passed, and we ended up passing a 2-year bill. I can tell you, I was also instrumental in that highway bill. They wanted to increase truck weights, and this will be, I'm sure, interesting to the local officials here. They wanted to increase truck weights to 90,000 pounds and allow triple trailers on the road. And I got to thinking about this. I was thinking, I know for a fact there's 12 inches of concrete on that interstate, But in our city streets in Hazleton, there's only 6 inches of asphalt. And when those trucks get off the interstate, they're now on the local roads. And you know who pays for that? Not the federal government. The local taxpayer pays for the local roads. Who's going to pay for this when they destroy, especially with the frost and thaw that we have here in Pennsylvania? Who's going to pay for this when they destroy our roads? And how safe is it with triple trailers? And and members were lobbied very hard for this. And so I partnered with a Democrat from Chicago and introduced a bill that would stop that. And I had to fight very hard, even with people in my own party, to be able to do that. And we were able to stop it. We were able to take it out of the highway bill. It will be studied for 3 years, what the cost will be to the local taxpayers, what the safety issues will be, putting these heavier, longer trucks on bridges that are already structurally deficient. So, you know, there's sometimes a lack of common sense in Washington, and I thought a great highway bill would have been the best way to kickstart our economy here. Well, I thank you all very much for taking your time. I had a good time venting. I feel like I went to a concert. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. The one thing I really appreciate when you say compromise, because that's so important to me in the state capitol also. I didn't know about your baseball, though. If I would have known that, I brought my pink bat up here. Some of you know about this, some of you don't. But we always hear locally about legislators give your money back, like people think we make too much. So I don't take my COLA for the first 4 years. I wrote it back to the state treasury. Then I thought, you know something, I will just give it to charity. So I've pretty much been following the cancer trail and trying to give my money to cancer research. And we have a Take a Swing Against Breast Cancer every year in City Island. So last year my team participated the first time. We came in third. Well, I'm not a third type person, so this year we came in first, and that's what this bat's about. So Lou, I don't know if I want to ask you to be on my team next year or challenge you with your teams, but we'll do something with it. Anyway, that's what this bat's all about. But thank you everyone for coming. I know you have to get back to work. If anybody has any state-related questions, I will stay and talk to you. I think most of the people here, though, I talk to on a regular basis, so you've probably already told me what you needed to tell me, but I will be here for a while if you want to talk. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Sue Helm. If you have any questions about what you just saw or any state government-related matters, my contact information will appear on your screen shortly, along with Congressman Barletta's contact information if you'd like to contact him directly. Please join me next time for another edition of Legislative Report.